Since I am mainly looking at video games that may be suitable for people who have never really played video games before, I thought it might be time to look back at the discoveries and moments and more associated with specific games I've played in my life. This is a series I'm calling Gaming Memories. Today, on November 4th, is my birthday. And every birthday I make a gaming tradition to play what is quite possibly my favourite game of all time, Metroid Prime. And you save, or where I last left off on a save file, whatever. But how did I come to play Metroid Prime? What other games in this awesome series have I played? Well, let's travel through the galaxy, so to speak, to unravel this mystery. Well, actually I first heard of the series through Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo 64. Yes, NES wasn't the only one. Oh, Samus? Never heard of her, and yes, it said her in the instructions. Didn't confuse me or anything as a kid. I could totally imagine a woman under their power suit. It's surely a different experience to those who already saw the endings or instructions of the first three Metroid games or grew up with them, but I didn't even know about them. Then it was announced that there was a game coming to the GameCube with the title of Metroid Prime, and I recognised Samus in the screenshots. Then, outside of the first two Super Smash Bros. Games, I really didn't pay attention to the Metroid franchise for a while, until a short-lived Australian gaming magazine that was focused on the GameCube reviewed both Metroid Fusion on the Game Boy Advance and Metroid Prime on the GameCube. The reviews and how they described the games really intrigued me, plus both games could be connected. More on that later. So I figured I would, mostly as an impulse purchase, and I think I had a voucher, get both Metroid Fusion and Metroid Prime. I remember how hard it was to get because I had to go back and forth between two stores to find Metroid Prime at the least. There was even a GameCube stand that had a demo of the game. I enjoyed the Metroid Prime demo a lot, which consisted of a prologue of the game. After exploring the environment and gradually understanding the controls, I was convinced my purchase was going to be worth it. And well, we'll get into that. I think I did not play Metroid Prime at first, mostly because the family wanted to watch TV. You have to remember, this was before the Wii U and Switch were a thing. So I decided to sit down with my Game Boy Advance and Metroid Fusion. So, to an extent, Metroid Fusion is my entry point to the Metroid series, which is odd in retrospect given the mostly linear nature and the story that relies a bit on understanding the previous Metroid games. But I was intrigued by the story, and the gameplay of Metroid Fusion hooked me instantly. I'm pretty sure I could recognize what I saw from Metroid Prime demo and the gameplay. The movement, the jumping, the shooting of enemies and doors, the exploration, the bosses, the abilities and upgrades. Then I finally got around to playing Metroid Prime the next day. I do to an extent want to elaborate on what I have said about Metroid Prime in past videos, maybe do a review or something, and better than the one I wrote when I was a lot younger. Check out one of my roasting childhood game reviews videos for that one. But Metroid Prime was, and to an extent still is, one of the most immersive games I've ever played, complete with impressive production values and the gameplay of past Metroid games transitioning to 3D. You can explore rooms and environments, fight enemies and bosses, come across doors and other things that can't necessarily be interacted with straight away, and so on. Even the first-person perspective was great, and you could scan things. The boss encounters were one of my favourite things in Metroid Prime. I remember jumping for joy after beating nearly every boss when it would usually take a number of attempts to do so. I enjoyed Metroid Fusion and Metroid Prime at the same time and wanted to complete them both for the individual bonuses you got with a Nintendo GameCube Game Boy Advance cable. You can get the Fusion suit for Samus in Metroid Prime, just a nice little cosmetic thing. And the other bonus was Metroid on the NES. Given that Metroid Prime's story takes place after the NES game, this inclusion was more than just a retro flashback for some. I played the NES Metroid on the GameCube and I never completed it at first, but we'll come back to that. So, the vague news of a sequel to Metroid Prime being in development filled me with so much excitement, and I think not long after, Metroid Zero Mission on the Game Boy Advance was announced. A fine time to be a Metroid fan indeed. And guess what? I got them both on the same day. 2 Metroid games to play yet again. Playing these games was an interesting experience to say the least. While Metroid games, in retrospect, have that vibe to them where they grow on you or you feel compelled to go back to them after completing them once, Zero Mission and Prime 2 Echoes definitely fit that vibe for me. I enjoy them both, but Metroid Prime probably was overshadowed too much by the greatness of its predecessor. However, I felt compelled to give Metroid Prime 2 another go, and enjoyed it more. even though the difficulty of the bosses and the tendency to get lost with the light dark dimensions idea remained. Zero Mission also helped me appreciate the 2D Metroid games a lot more. Zero Mission is usually considered an improvement over the NES original, and it also allowed you to play the NES game after completing the game once. So I did cheat with this game. I would play the game on my Game Boy Advance next to a computer screen with the game map. And even with the map, it was still a challenging game. But I had fun with it actually, and can appreciate to a small extent how it started the Metroid series. I also got Super Metroid on the Virtual Console, and years later on the SNES Mini. I remember playing Super Metroid for a little bit on someone's emulator, and I do remember enjoying it. Only when I played the game on the Virtual Console and SNES Mini did I truly appreciate it and complete it. Multiple times. It is probably my favourite 2D Metroid, or is it? We'll come back to that debate. Anyways, Metroid Prime 3 came out not long after the Wii was announced, also very exciting. I remember being blown away by the motion controls when I first started playing it. I also really liked the game and mostly thought it was a satisfactory ending to a trilogy of awesome games. That is mostly where my experiences with the Metroid series end. I did play a tiny bit of Metroid Prime Hunters on the DS at a game store as my introduction to the DS, but I have not played the full game or its multiplayer. Same for the other DS game Metroid Prime Pinball. I have not played Metroid Other M or Metroid Federation Force, games I vaguely know to have a less than favourable reception. I have played a tiny bit of Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, probably on a plane and maybe on a computer. I am not all that familiar with Metroid 2 or even its fan remake known as AM2R. I got Metroid Samus Returns, the remake of Metroid 2 for the 3DS, and didn't play it. I honestly don't know why. I must have got distracted by other games. Only recently did I get around to playing it for a little bit, and for good reason. The upcoming release of Metroid Dread. I do not know if I ever asked questions about Dread, which was vaguely talked about as a sequel to Fusion or Metroid 5, but its reveal was full of hype. I got a bit of a sense that the 3DS game would be a bit similar to what Dread would be, so I'm glad I played it for a bit. I'm going through these 3DS and Switch games as we speak. Well, I've mostly completed Dread. I want to do a review very soon that does that game justice. Is it the best 2D Metroid? We'll see. So, the galaxy is at peace, knowing that I, of video games for fun, consider the Metroid series my favourite, with others such as Mario and Zelda not that far behind, which is surprising when you think about it. Again, Fusion is a fairly unique entry point for me. Much of the Metroid series grows on you, or generally require more than one playthrough to truly appreciate. These are all fine, as the games, well, most of them, are very well designed, complete with a great sense of item and upgrade progression, generally good level design that gives you a vague sense of where to go without really telling you or forcing you away from entrances and items just out of your reach, even with Fusion and the Prime games having a bit more direction. Not to mention a suitably alien atmosphere that thrives on great graphics and sci-fi like music and a sense of isolation. I still play the series to this day, even with a cheaper re-release of the Metroid Prime trilogy on Wii U, meaning I essentially have 2 copies of the Metroid Prime games. Oh, and 3 copies of Metroid on NES if you count the GameCube and Zero Mission ports and the NES Mini. So, today I'll be playing Metroid Prime. I deserve it. Happy to have the Metroid series as part of my gaming memories.